Welcome to Growth Architects, a podcast for tech entrepreneurs, product innovators, and marketing strategists. Whether you're searching for product market fit, exploring new growth channels, or trying to avoid common startup pitfall, this is where you'll find proven strategies to fuel your success. And now, let's get started. Hello, everybody. My guest today is Geneva Loader, and she's head of marketing of Gresham Tech, a fintech company. Geneva has a long experience ranging from agency to consultancy, and recently head of marketing and marketing manager for. Sorry, we're gonna do this again. Geneva has Geneva has a lot of experience ranging from agency to consultancy, and most recently head of marketing. With her, we're going to talk about the role of marketing and branding once you are merging different brands and how to make sure that you ensure consistency. She recently supervised the integration of a new platform in the ecosystem of her company. So we are going to talk also about how she did it there. Welcome, Geneva. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, same. Well, you're really a host that brings a lot of experience. So I'm very happy that we can record this episode today. But before we start, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Australia. I grew up in Sydney and started my marketing career working in the Australian market agencies and also publisher side. So I spent some time at Viacom Networks and then at Yahoo. And have always been sort of a digital native, touching lots of different parts of the digital advertising industry, whether that's sort of selling ads to trafficking ads to coming up with digital strategies and then running integrated digital campaigns. And it was sort of right as Google and Facebook matured and sort of have grown up with the industry with that sort of base level knowledge. About 9 years ago, I moved to the UK and decided to try my toe in this market. Managed to continue working with some amazing agency groups within Omnicom, and then decided I might give consulting a go. So I left agencies and spent some time at Bain working in their marketing consulting team here in London, and then from there got a taste for kind of broader business challenges, I guess, being in that environment, and then started building up some fintech experience and spent 2 years in digital assets. And now I work for a big fintech company called Gresham Tech.
Nice. That's amazing. What I noticed from a lot of people that have transitioned from the agency world to working in-house is that they always bring on board a very structured approach. Do you recognize the same about yourself?
I think for anybody that's ever worked with me, they know that I am structure. I love process. I love having a plan. I love having everything tracked. And I think in the agency world, because you're moving at pace and you're working on so many different clients at the same time, that it just becomes embedded into sort of how you work. I think when you take that learning and start to integrate it into a client side role, it just allows you to be really nimble when big projects like integration plans do start to come into the mix. As soon as you're doing anything outside of managing one brand, it's great to be able to leverage agency experience where you were able to do that across a wide breadth of clients. Yeah. I mean, I love it. You should see our Asana board. It is labeled to the hilt, and it's very beautiful. I take a lot of pride in it.
Okay, that's nice. Well, because in an agency, obviously, everything is a project, and you treat all these projects, multiple projects at the same time. So being able to plan and also being structured is essential if you want to have things running. Okay, well, fun that your experience actually is very very similar to what I've heard from other guests of the show. Also, on a personal level, right? I'm curious to know, what is it that attracted you about fintech?
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of chapter of my career, really, because I had touched various financial institutions, financial organizations, but there was a much broader spectrum of mainly D2C businesses that I worked on throughout my career. So I think for me, there's just this really interesting intersection of where the technology landscape is going, emerging technologies and innovation, both from a customer experience point of view with, where banks are trying to get to, and that kind of user journey to capture that user as quickly as possible. Plus the fact that finance is really the hub of where the world's biggest decisions are being made. So whether or not you're working with, a neobank and they're, young and up and coming, and they're thinking about kind of how they improve these really fast-paced user experiences, all the way through to what I do now, which is work with some of the biggest financial institutions in the world who are trying to tackle those digital transformation journeys in a slightly different way, and have a lot of, legacy and infrastructure that they need to try and kind of tackle to kind of get over those challenges. It just feels a lot like that's where, the biggest impact can be driven to our day-to-day lives. Everybody has a bank account, and everybody needs money to sort of live. And so when you kind of think about how to market to the different sort of segments that fit within that broad category, it's a really interesting place to kind of to play. And then if you overlay that with kind of marketing innovation as well, when you're talking about, tech experiences, tech innovation, and marketing experiences and marketing innovation, there's this really juicy kind of playground that you can experiment with, which I think is super exciting.
Yeah, that's very true what you're saying. So for fintech, it's definitely something that impacts a lot of people. And the choices that you make tend to also affect a lot of people, a lot of consumers, because we all use fintech products in our daily life. And what's nice about that is that also the choices that you make in terms of branding and user experience tend to affect a lot of people, also different user groups. So that's definitely an aspect that I would like to explore with you today. Well, when it comes to fintech, there is also a huge platform component involved, right? And platform is really one of those aspects where marketing, design, and product really merge. I understand that you've recently been involved into an integration into Gresham. So would you like to tell us a bit more about what that integration was and what your role has been?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I've only been there for 10 months now. And in that 10 months, we've seen some amazing product elements that have sort of changed across the business. There's sort of two that come to mind to answer your question. I think the first is under the Gresham brand, we've been doing a lot of improvements to the brand positioning and trying to ensure that people know and love all of the kind of experiences they have with Gresham. That organization has been on a long journey of integrating new businesses that have been acquired over a period of a number of years, and we've had to absorb those brands and those offerings under the same umbrella so that we can serve a consistent message and user experience to our clients. In addition to that, so on the side, we've also launched a new product that we built with one of our clients, Flow, which was a completely sort of separate brand that we launched to at the same sort of to run at the same time as our normal core business. Creating kind of a distinctive brand and separation around that while we're trying to consolidate brands on the other side has been a really interesting dynamic to kind of to play with. I think the biggest challenge that we have is the acquisition that we made a couple of years ago of a brand called Electra in the US. And, that is a well-loved brand in the finance industry. It has amazing client reviews and feedback, and it had built up its own identity and network of users. And as we've worked to integrate that into the Gresham world and to start to sunset that Electra brand, it's been difficult to change hearts and minds of people who not only use it every day, but also the reputation that it has in the industry. And when we thought about the depth of a brand integration, really the kind of every single customer touch point, whether it's a prospecting customer all the way through to those people who know and love the platform itself, you have to think about all of those elements as you start to merge into this new future of transitioning users over into Gresham. And it's funny, I was actually at a client's office yesterday, and we were doing a case study with them, and they're still living in that world where they're talking about the old brand. And we've got a big job to do. When you fall in love with something, it's like, when you have an amazing user experience, you want to hold on to that. It's like, imagine Netflix changed its brand. We'd be still calling it Netflix for all
Netflix. Or
time.
Twitter, actually. Twitter
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
example of that.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly
nice.
right. Exactly right.
But let's just take a step back, right? Because I realized that I haven't asked you. So, for the ones who don't know it, what is Gresham and what do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So, we, as you said, we're a fintech business. We provide the infrastructure software for the trades and reconciliations that some of the biggest financial institutions in the world utilize. Data integrity and data confidence are our sort of two key levers. We can ingest any sort of financial data, reconcile that entire process, and then get it into a format that it needs for your sort of reporting purposes. Finance is our kind of our sweet spot in the area that we work in the most, I would say, where our client set is. But we also have a lot of case studies outside of that in sort of energy and across some other corporates as well, some other additional use cases. But yeah, it's a very privileged position to be in when clients are giving such sensitive data and information over to us. So we need to manage that trust that they provide us with, which is why this kind of brand integration piece is so interesting as
Yeah.
well, because it's not just entertainment like the Netflix example. It's really important information that we need to kind of manage on their behalf.
Yeah, trust is key in fintech in general, right? And I guess especially once you're talking with very large brands, it's super important that you guys can always show how much you're reliable, because that's obviously, as we said before, something that it's gonna impact on a lot of people. And coming to the way in which the whole brand is structured, so do you guys have just one product or do you have more than one?
Yeah, we have multiple products. I think, again, as we've acquired businesses and grown, we've needed to make a decision around if they sort of stay as. I mean, a lot of the times, fintech businesses, the name of the business is the name of the product. Like if you think about sort of a Sage or a Xero or QuickBooks, often that's the brand and then that's the product. You log in and that's exactly the experience. Whereas with us and as businesses like us grow and bring on new skills and subsets underneath it, we need to make really key decisions around, do we keep the product name that everybody has kind of been using for sometimes often decades, or do we kind of do a rebrand around that product and start to integrate it into our new structure that is kind of constantly evolving and changing as the business grows. For us, we have sort of three core products, I would say. Control is our first product, which is all around reconciliation. We have a Connect product, which is the data piece that I mentioned before. And then we also have a data services and managed services offering. So it's in more of a services tier. But, that even that is sort of something that we're looking at kind of embedding into organizations, because some people are still calling us, the names that they've heard in the past, whereas we're trying to transition them into this kind of new future.
Yeah, I'd like to stop you here for a second because actually that's something that I see a lot, especially with SaaS that are into the B2B space. What they tend to do after they grow, after the initial phase, is that they then tend to create a suite of different tools for different kind of users, different kind of companies. So that's actually a problem that you see. It's quite a common problem, right? Also, for example, you see it in the energy sector, had a recent experience with that. You see it in fintech. You see actually really a lot of business sectors. So how do you guys solve this? How do you guys decide to kind of keep a separate product and separate look and feel, for example, versus integrated everything into the same platform?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think really it depends on the output that you need for clients. If there's a natural synergy around, the data or the use case for that product, then it makes sense to kind of bring it together. If they're wildly different and ultimately they're being used by different people within an organization, or there's never going to be a kind of natural synergy and natural overlap, it makes sense to sort of keep them separate. But I think there's this really interesting, and this is talking more generally, not necessarily about us, but I think there's a really interesting element of product marketing that is around, what needs to be at the product level and then what needs to be at the feature level. So are we talking about a feature here that is, another dashboard that can be launched within the tool, or is it another sort of element that could be sat under that product banner, or does it need to be its own sort of standalone product? And I think this is where we sort of got to with the launch of the new brand that we have, Flow, is it was used by a completely different audience. So the Flow Tech solution that we have built is is a design studio for banks, and it's never that the reconciliation team are never going to be using that tool, so it deserved its own product definitely. But then we almost took it to another level and said actually it deserves its own brand. So how does sort of brand, product, and feature all sort of stack up as you're managing bringing some of these different components together? And ultimately it needs to be anchored around that client experience and that sort of that user, because if the user is someone completely different, you've got an opportunity, as I said.
Okay. Okay. So that's very interesting. It's so you would say that the first thing that you want to look at once deciding if you want to create a different product or actually even a different brand is really who the user is going to be, if there is any chance that different user groups are ever going to interact, and also if there is some kind of gain into bundling the products together. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. And the user experience, right? If it's going to be sort of one login and then you've got access to a portal where it's easy to kind of navigate around, build up that single brand and that single product, because it's going to have a stronger foothold. The more products and the more brands that you end up having in a portfolio, the more kind of confusing it is to sell who you are as a business. So I think, try and simplify it as much as you can, but if it really is a completely different offering and a completely different audience set, then that deserves its own space and territory. I think when you start to level this up as well outside of product, like from a marketing point of view, where we start to talk about getting these products and services out in market, if I'm creating a load of blogs for a product that's talking about, in our case, reconciliation, and trade reporting, and the cleanliness of the data and all of the kind of complexity that goes into explaining that product, it's going to be really confusing to a user if we then start talking about front end design and some of these other elements that another product and service may offer. They're going to find it a bit jarring to see that kind of the content that's spouted for each of those kind of products, that don't necessarily relate. So I think when you think about the full end-to-end mapping of what the product's actually doing and how you communicate that further and further up the funnel, that's where you might start to see, it makes sense to actually carve this out, and we're going to be driving them through to a completely different destination to get that client on board and to work with them.
Yeah, yeah, sounds very interesting. Sounds very interesting, and definitely something that I think a lot of people can relate to. So let's make it practical, right? And let's talk about the experience that you have recently had with integrating, yeah, one new product into the ecosystem. I'm curious to know, how did you do that? Especially, what I'm curious to know is, how was the communication between, let's say, marketing and product there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. So the I've actually inherited the legacy of the acquisition that happened 2 years ago, and from a branding perspective, all of the content had already been changed. So the only thing that sort of mentions the previous brand is that we've got a press release that says, we acquired this business, they've now become part of us. And so from a prospect perspective, they may have heard of Electra, but they might come through to that page and say, okay, it makes sense, you were acquired, now I'm going to continue my user experience with this brand and this business under the Gresham banner. But for our existing customers, there was, up until sort of right at the time that I started, they were still logging into the dashboard that was branded in the old branding. So the experience was continuing with that client because we hadn't kind of gotten to the stage where we were merging that over yet under sort of the new rollout. I think the lessons that I've learned in sort of witnessing that and seeing how that's kind of rippled through the organization, and now hearing from our clients around them still loving this old brand, is when if you're integrating a brand or a product into your organization, it's almost like you're launching a new product. You need to think about it like you're rolling out a new brand, and have clear, exciting, engaging communication that's making them fall in love with that new proposition the same way they did the first time they acquired it. So when you're building out your integration plans or thinking about kind of merging products and services together, the rollout of that needs to almost be considered like you've got a shiny new product.
New
And
launch.
often the struggle that people have is they don't have the budget to do that, right? It's like, cool, we've integrated them, we're going through a cost cutting exercise, or we're actually stripping down rather than and consolidating rather than doing this big brand launch. But if you want it to embed properly with your clients, you need to make it sexy and jazzy for them to say, I'm so excited to be kind of being a part of this onboarding process, and I understand the culture of the new proposition that I'm onboarding into, if that makes sense.
Got it. So that also means, I guess, paying a lot of attention to what you just said, the onboarding, and how to educate client into using something which is actually new.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fundamentals of the system are still the same, but the brand experience, yes, is 100% new. And, the tone often of that brand and that usability is going to change as well. So, yeah, and it was really interesting, actually. Yesterday, one of our clients said, we have a very clear identity of who we are as a business, and we want to choose partners that align with us. And when we chose your brand, we really felt like it aligned with us. And so when you're going and shifting that brand into something new or putting it under a different banner, if there's any contradiction in almost those two cultures, then, a client's going to feel that, right? They're going to feel like, hang on a minute, I had this white glove service and it felt like everybody was really working for us and integrating into our team. And then we've become part of this much larger organization, not necessarily in our case, but I've seen lots of, other acquisitions in the fintech space where, small fintechs have been gobbled up into these massive, huge organizations. And those businesses purposefully chose a smaller fintech because they wanted that like personal service. So making sure that through that transition, that's sort of communicated as well, I think is really, it's just a part of that integration plan. And, you might lose some people on the way or annoy them or have to, come back and, provide them with a different service. But that's all part of, managing that kind of integration, I think.
Got it. Yeah. It's well, what I've also seen is that from the point of view of more design and user experience, there is also a very strong correlation, right, between education and onboarding and engagement with your platform. Do you have a similar experience there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting one of where that UX space is really going. I think it's moving at such a rapid rate that regardless of whether you're integrating a new product or changing the services that sit within that, or looking at doing kind of branding restructures, if you're not constantly thinking about how you're improving user experience with your clients, because the space is just constantly evolving, then you're missing out on improving opportunities and improving kind of customer stickiness at every chance, right? If you think about, again, some of the conversations that we've been having recently is about how do you attract young talent into any business nowadays. Lots of people are talking about how you get kind of younger people to want to come and work for an organization rather than build a business on TikTok and make millions of dollars by building their kind of following that way as a social content producer. The opportunity for them is, how do you take this fast-paced world that you live in? Like they use UX across a number of platforms. They've grown up with it. They expect everything to work instantly and be seamless and know all of your data already and move you through a process that's kind of fully automated. And then if you think about bringing those people into a financial institution, which has KYC and, needs to do a load of checks, and something that used to take somebody, days to set up, they now want instantly. How do you attract those people to come into a business that's going to move really slowly to try and get to that fast-paced world that they're used to? It's a really interesting time, I think, at the moment, regardless of what the kind of objectives are in UX digital transformation. Like, these experiences, you constantly need to have your finger on the pulse of how you improve them and how you tweak them, and listening to your customers around, if only we had this feature, because I've compared it to my Netflix account that allows me to do X, Y, and Z. I just find it so interesting that, businesses are missing out on a load of opportunity there, I think, around making, like, listen to your customer and make it seamless. It's so
Yeah.
crazy. There's a business that I know of from a past life called Joybird in the US, and they've just listened to the customer so much that they almost preempt whatever you might need to know. So when you go and make an order with them,
What do they do?
they're just a furniture, not just, but they're a furniture company. And so, but you create the custom fabric for the furniture, and there's like usually quite long lead times when it comes to furniture builds, etc. But they've created this completely integrated system so that the customer feels like they're in control. They're updated the whole way along the journey. They get updates in real time around, it's left the factory or it's at this stage or whatever. They almost preempt that there is this long window, and make digital experiences that make you feel like you're moving through an 8 or 12-week process in a really handheld way. And I think the chance of bringing in someone like me, who comes from agency background and consultancy background, into a business that has been around a really long time, is you bring those other experiences out of your category. So I'm saying to the development team, why can't we have these steps in the journey for our customers? Because I've heard about it from a furniture company. It's like, how do you again engage more talent that's come from maybe outside of your category to think about those user experiences? Because a lot of the time they're going to help you deliver something out of the box that you maybe in your financial bubble wouldn't necessarily have thought
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, and there's two things here, right? So one is the importance of UX, and sometimes actually even just UI. Because, for example, I think that one of the things that has really determined the success of companies like Revolut, like Monzo in UK, is really just that, right? Because for a lot of time, people were complaining about the fact that banks hadn't innovated in a long, long time. These companies, well, I come from the fintech industry, actually, and I think that the expectation about how disruptive these companies would have been probably was a bit higher than what happened in real life. And we all expected something to totally change your daily life as a user, whereas there have definitely been improvement, but it's more, say, an incremental change rather a revolution. But the reason why they've been so successful is nothing but UX and UI. They haven't
Yeah.
offered anything else. No different business model. If anything, they have been struggling with creating new business models.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm hearing from you is that what you said, like, if as users we have experience of what is a great UX from different areas of our living, right? It's not because of the fact that we all of a sudden are in finance or, for example, in B2B, that then we don't expect it anymore. Because what you hear a lot of brands saying is like, yeah, we don't need to pay a lot of attention to UX, for example, because we are a B2B company. And I think there's nothing more wrong than that. You're just
Yeah.
leaving money on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think it creates, product innovation outside of just that UX experience. If you have a load of clients that are saying, I wish I could right click this function because I want to see, the data behind it, or where that comes from, or why that's plugged into a dashboard or whatever, that could actually open up the product development to say, what else could we right click, and what else do they want to see, and what other part of the dashboard needs to have various views. And then it's not actually just, you can see UX not only as improving that kind of current customer engagement, but helping you with the innovation piece moving forward. But I just think, I don't know, I think a lot of poor development teams are sort of stuck, constantly trying to keep up with just the base level of UX improvements. Any product that was built, more than even 5 years ago now is catching up to try and, improve their back end systems, improve, the user flows. And when you're constantly feeling like you're, behind the eight ball a little bit to get to that place, talking about product innovation and, the nice to have elements really get sort of deprioritized. But there's, if you've got capacity to kind of even carve out an hour or two a week just to get together as a team and say, what have you experienced in your day or in your week this week that was a really great user experience? That stimulus is so important. In
Yeah.
general, I don't think people get together and talk about stimulus enough. Like, we've just put in some time in the week for my team to get together and say, this was a great ad. And why was it a great ad? And why did I engage with it? And why do I care? And that's not an hour that we're necessarily going to get a load of new work out of. It might not even change any of our creative, but it's a chance for us to be, thoughtful and to share great work that I've taken from my agency experience, because we used to do that all the time, but not very many client side roles keep that, exciting finger on the pulse of kind of what's trending. And I think that's relevant for UX as well.
Yeah, otherwise the problem is that often what you do is just maintenance, right, of what you have. And then again, because I think that if you just do that, you miss a lot of business development opportunities, actually. Because once you have a product, right, be it a platform or an app, what you see is that the way in which you develop your product, so really like design development, is really your marketing. So the way in which you develop your product also means that you can engage your users better. You can even generate referrals, right? A pop-up appears and say, yeah, refer a friend or a colleague or invite someone else to the platform. So the way you do that also has a huge potential on the development of your company.
Yeah.
Are you guys
I think
doing
that
anything in that direction? Yeah.
just on that point, I think it's so interesting in B2B as well, because referral, like a lot of the time, B2B businesses, they're not the only ones that are using the tool. Some other partner that they have or some other network might be needing to integrate with that system at the same time. And if you can add a referral element to that, you're actually going to be able to get that sale. Whereas when it's D2C, your bank, for example, it's just you and your bank. Like, you're not going to ask your insurance company to bill you with a different, debit card. It's like, you're never going to be able to get that referral there. Whereas when you've got a B2B system and you're integrating other organizations into it, especially for reporting, if you've got a referral mechanism there, that's a huge win for sharing that user experience and saying, it looks like on your side it's really hard to get the data in here. Ours did it in 1 second. Maybe you should consider using, Gresham to help you do that. And integrated referral in platform. I don't think very many people are doing that. Even to keep using the Netflix example. Like, imagine in Netflix when it says, did you enjoy that show, and you got a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you're referring that to a friend and saying, hey, I watched this and it was great and whatever, like, the data that they have on that to say, are they a user? How often do they watch? Can I map similar content? Like, I just find it so interesting.
Yeah, it's a huge growth mechanism. Yeah. Well, Geneva, it has been a great conversation so far. There's actually one last question that I want to ask you before we wrap this up is, how can users get in contact or know more about what you do?
Hit up the website. So greshamtech.com. We've got a load of intel on sort of what we do and some amazing case studies that we've shared. Otherwise, hit me up personally on LinkedIn. Just Geneva Loader on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.